Good morning, everyone. Britt Simon here. Hope you're all well. Hope you're having a great weekend. Let me just do a couple of things here. I just want to bring up some information for you, which I'm sure we're going to get some questions about, the visa bulletin. So let me just show my screen and bring that up for you. There we go. Share screen. Good. Okay. So the visa bulletin was published this week which is the second visa bulletin for DV 2026. And I'm quite sure there was confusion caused by, by the visa bulletin because it was a complete repeat of the set of numbers from the first visa bulletin. That really shouldn't have been such a big surprise to us, to be honest. And I had mentioned that it was still a possibility that we would get no increases, at least in some of the regions. I thought we might have an increase perhaps in Africa, but other than that, the numbers were, from the first visa bulletin, they were extremely high, and so there was really no need to increase the numbers, and I totally understand that. So let's just look at the numbers for a second again and just think about this, right? So Africa 17,500. Now last year, not that the numbers are the same year to year, but last year we got up to about 58,000, right? So in the first month, they already moved about 20% of the of the overall year. Is that right? More than 20%. So they gave us like 2 or 3 months numbers straight up front in the first month, right? Well, if somebody gives you 2 or 3 months, if you're expecting 12 salary payments a year, and somebody gives you, let's say, 3 or 4 months worth of salary on day one, you don't then in the second month, you don't say, oh, well, give me my normal salary. You say, yeah, fair enough. I had 3 or 4 months money from the first month, right? So I've been overpaid, and therefore probably I'm not going to get any money this month, right? And that's basically what's happened. I mean, look at Asia 10,000. The Asia total numbers, even if they went to the very end, is probably probably about 30,000 or so. So they gave us like a third of all the numbers that are out there, a third of all the numbers, and probably some of those numbers won't go current. So probably they've given us 6 months worth of numbers in month one. So they didn't increase it in month two. Shouldn't be a big surprise. And in fact, I wouldn't be at all surprised if we see some numbers frozen again next month. So please just understand these were extraordinary numbers in the first month. And if you thought that trend was going to continue, you were nuts. We were not going to see that sort of trend. That's not how it works, right? And you can say the same thing for Oceania and South America. Same thing exactly. They're not normal numbers. I haven't. This just reminds me, I haven't done my historical numbers yet. But let me just show you that visa bulletin numbers. If you come to my blog here, BrittSimonSays.com, and you go to visa bulletin numbers, scroll down, and you can see the numbers historically, right? So let's look at, for example, Asia. Asia last year, right, in 2025, didn't reach 11,000 until August. So in other words, it took all of that time to get down to 11,000. And in this year, in the first month, they went to 10,000 straight away. Clearly not normal behavior, right? If we look at and last year wasn't particularly unusual. It was a bit unusual, but it wasn't particularly unusual. You can see that it's very unusual to see numbers above 10,000 for several months into normal years. That's in Asia, right? We have some years where the final cutoffs were actually lower. The final cutoff in DV 2015 for Asia was 7,650. So the first month being at 10,000, it was bizarre. It was nuts. Anyway, so that's the one thing I just wanted to talk about with the visa bulletin numbers. The other really bizarre thing from this visa bulletin, in my opinion, it's bizarre, is that we don't have we don't have the selectee numbers for DV26. Now, let me just show you something, how that would normally look, right? For some of you that perhaps haven't seen that, if we go to the visa bulletin and we have a look at previous years, right? So if we have a look at the visa bulletin from 2025, right? Well, fiscal year 25, no, hang on, last year. So this one. So the September visa bulletin from last year had all of the selectee numbers, right? And that's very normal. That happens every year. That in the visa bulletin that's published in August, we get the selectee numbers for other countries. Now, a few years ago, I checked every single one of these in the last 20-something years, 22 years, I think it was. And a few years ago, we were getting the selectee numbers earlier in the year. So they were being published in as early as May, June, or July. They were being published. I mean, really quickly after the announcement of the results, they would just publish those numbers. Now, as time went on, in more recent years, it's been in the visa bulletin that was published either in August or the one that was published in July. Right? It's never been later than those two. Now, it wasn't in the September visa bulletin that was published in August this year, and it's not in the October visa bulletin that was published in September. So this is really quite unusual that we haven't got those numbers. There's another place where they could publish these. If you have a look at this, statistics. Oops. What is going on? Living lottery statistics. Why can't I spell this morning? Okay, you can go to this website and you can see the number of selectees for each of the recent programs, and DV25 is there, but DV26 is not there yet. So this is another place where that data could be published. And basically that's, if we look at last year's, that is the data that was at the bottom of that that visa bulletin that I just showed you from 2024, right? That's the same data, the same information. It gives us a little bit of information about how many selectees there were, a little bit of background information about the year, and then importantly, it gives us the number of selectees per country. And that's how we find out, how many selectees there are. Why is this important? Well, many of you are asking questions, for example, about things like, will there be a second draw? It's impossible to say whether there would be a second draw or not unless you know how many selectees are chosen in the first draw, right? So we don't know how many selectees there are in the first draw, and therefore we can't answer that question, will there be a second draw? That's one question being asked. Some of you want to know, my case number is X number. Is it a high number or a low number? Well, you can say what the number is compared to the ranges we know about, because we've got a bit of an idea of what the ranges are. And so you can sort of say, well, yeah, I'm like towards the back of the queue. You can kind of get an idea, but you don't know how long the queue is. You don't know how many people are in the queue. You don't know how many people are in front of you in the queue, right? So you know that you're towards the back of a queue, but you don't know how many people there are in the queue. So it's completely pointless getting depressed about your number at the moment, because you don't know how many people are standing in front of you in the queue, right? So not having these selectee numbers creates an uncertainty. And, I don't know why they've done this. I don't know why they've done this. I posted on something the other day saying I think there's three possible answers to this. The first answer might be the government has decided that they don't want to provide this information. They don't want to be transparent about the number of selectees for whatever reason, right? That's reason number one. Second reason, the government have decided that because of the lawsuit that I've filed against the government, and basically have sort of won already, it's almost won basically. But because of that lawsuit, they don't want to provide more evidence to me about DV 2026 so that I can show that DV 26 has been messed up in the same way that DV 25 has been messed up. Now, I know it's been messed up. I don't need the bloody evidence, frankly. I don't need the evidence to know that I'm right on this, and that the lawsuit for DV26 will prevail in the same way that the lawsuit for DV25 prevailed. I don't need that evidence, but at the same time, maybe that's part of their decision. Maybe they are sort of fudging the numbers or something, and they're reviewing the numbers. I don't know. That's a possibility. That's possibility number 2. Possibility number 3 is they're just freaking incompetent, right? And they just don't know what they're doing. Now, some of you are going to say, "Oh no, this is the American government. They know what they're doing. They're very good at things. So look how organized that country must be." You have no freaking idea how stupid these people are sometimes. Just think about the UK lawsuit for a minute. They managed to run the lottery, not 1 year, for 2 years, not just 1 year, but for 2 years. They ran the lottery without including one of the countries that was supposed to be included. How stupid do you have to be to completely mess that up? You have one job to do, and to run the bloody lottery, and you have one change that's being made in DV25, which is to turn on the switch for one more country, and you forget to do that. You're dumb as a rock if you can't figure that out. And then in DV26, they had to turn off one more country. They had to turn off Cuba, and they didn't turn off Cuba. So we've just proven they are that stupid. So don't be surprised when I say to you that it's incompetence, and I think it probably is. It's incompetence that makes them do some of these things. It's not necessarily bad intent. It's just simple incompetence. There's a new director, relatively new director at KCC. That might be playing into it. There are staff shortages in the government because Trump came in and fired a bunch of people, with Musk and so on. And so they've probably fired some of the people that knew what they were doing. So, it wouldn't be such a surprise to me. But anyway, that's an interesting thing. I just seen this thing. Well, I never know what this is. I think this is something like super chats or something, or super fans or something like that. It's super something. Anyway, so Joe Estefan, thank you for your CHF. That's isn't that Swiss francs? 10 Swiss francs. I can't remember how much that is. I used to work in Geneva for a while, so I'm kind of aware of the Swiss francs. Thanks a lot for your disinterested and selfless work. Disinterested, is that the word I already used? Already asked in the forum, but would repeat here. Should we see address service from you by May of next year for DV27? Oh, for sure. Yeah. So the address service is working. I keep losing the time to actually just write an article about it and make sure I've got all the terms and conditions, worked out. But yes, it's working. It's fine. If you needed it today, for example, you could email me and I'd give you the information. But ideally, just hang on. Yes, it will definitely. I'll publish information about it over the next couple of weeks if I can get to it. Well, I probably shouldn't publish I shouldn't promise the next couple of weeks because I've got something big to be released in the next couple of weeks. So we'll see. I am releasing the DV photo tool in the next couple of weeks. So that's frankly more on my mind and more on my plate at the moment than the address service thing. But yes, it will be there. Okay, thanks, Joe, and thanks for that donation. That's very sweet of you. Thank you. Philip, good morning. I'm going to say good morning to Philip. How are you, Philip? Hope things are well there for you, and I hope you're still getting fighting fit. Anyway, so yeah, been a difficult week in the USA this week, and I was thinking about yourself, and I know I don't see eye to eye with a lot of people on matters of politics in relation to religion, for example, politically motivated positions, or sorry, religiously motivated positions in politics, right? People are free to disagree about those things, and people will always disagree about those things. What we shouldn't disagree about is that there shouldn't be violence against people because you disagree with them. You should be able to talk things out, etc. But if you relentlessly call someone hateful names and you relentlessly tell them that they have no right to exist and that they're evil people and that they're that they're the scum of the earth and they're what's wrong in this country and they're mentally subnormal and everything else. If you relentlessly say that to people in public, then it's not surprising if someone comes up and punches you on the nose. It is a bit more surprising if somebody shoots you. Yes, I get it. But if you relentlessly hate people, don't be surprised when some of that hate comes back. It shouldn't happen. In a civilized society, we should be able to sort these things out. But in a civilized society, I don't point fingers at people telling you you're a scumbag, you're a piece of shit because you love someone that is of the same sex, for example, or because your skin color is different to mine, or because you feel like you were born in the wrong body, and so on. That's just, I would not make those sort of statements and comments in public because it's just hateful rhetoric for no good reason. Mind your own freaking business, everybody. I'm not talking to you, Philip. Everybody should just mind their own business, right? If you don't want an abortion, don't get an abortion, right? But let other people make their own decision. If you don't want to marry a person of the same sex, don't marry a person of the same sex, but leave other people to get on with their own business, right? And don't pick up one of many religious books and try and change the way other people live because of what it says in your book, right? Nobody else cares what it says in your book. They care about what it says in their heart or in their book, perhaps, right? So, we shouldn't be trying to control people's lives based on how we choose to live our own. We should just live our own lives and let other people live theirs with peace and happiness and love. But yes, I don't believe anybody should be picking up weapons and shooting people. That's just, it's not good. Anyway. Okay, so let's take some questions. One more thing before we go on to that. I should also show some of the long time no see. Yes, indeed. Let me just go back here 1 second and show you. Oh, what am I doing? This is what I want to show you. Yeah, that's more like it, right? And actually, if I move me around, let's put me over there. Okay, good. So this is the DV charts data from yesterday, right? Day before yesterday, Sunday morning. I'm normally live on a Saturday morning, but I had to do Sunday this week. So I just want to show you something. I've been saying for a little while, for a couple of months, 2 or 3 months at least, that unless they had done something in the last visa bulletin that was fairly extraordinary, and they really used all the available capacity at various embassies, they had created a situation before the end of the visa bulletin for DV 25, before the end of the final visa bulletins. They had created a situation where capacity was a problem, and they could not get to the cap numbers. They didn't have enough capacity in the system. As it happened, they had an impressive final month of scheduling. They scheduled over 8,000 people for September interviews. That was impressive, right? One of the better performances they've had, certainly in this year, but in a number of years. Despite that, and that was partly, by the way, helped by Nairobi, who took about 1,000 people. So if you've got one embassy take 1,000, it's not hard to hit a new number. But even despite that, they're not going to get anywhere close to the caps. They're going to waste several thousand visas this year, and that damage happened really quite early this year. By March and April, I was beginning to get frustrated, and Philip and I were having this conversation. I was constantly talking about, I'm looking in the front of the car, you're looking in the rearview mirror, because in March and April, the numbers were telling us that issuances were ahead of where they should be, and I'm saying, yeah, they are, but unless you issue the 2NLs that get you, to the end of the game, you're not going to actually issue all of the visas, right? You're gonna basically screw yourself up, and that's exactly what they did. And it was frustrating in March, and then April, and May, and June, and so on. And I was getting more and more frustrated because I could see this car crash happening because I'm looking at the front of the windscreen, I'm seeing this car crash happening kind of in front of my very eyes, where it became obvious that they were going to screw the bloody thing up, even though they'd had a really good start. And that's exactly what they did. They screwed it up. They've got to a situation now where with 3 weeks to go, not even 3 weeks, with less than 3 weeks to go, they've only issued just over 43,000 visas. And there are 52,000 available, right? Of which 1,000 will go through adjustment of status in the USA. So our consular processing numbers could get to 51,000, right? In theory, that's how many visas are available. But we're not going to get anywhere close to that. We're going to see a number several thousand lower than that. They've issued 43,000 and something now, 43,400 or so right now. There are the refused number is increasing quite rapidly. The 221G number is not dropping, right? Because many of those people are travel banned. The refusals is high and going higher because of the travel ban. The 221G number would normally at this time of year be dropping, but actually it's not dropping. It's staying about the same level. And a number of those people, particularly from the Asia region, are travel banned, right? So they're not going to get their visas, right? There are 11,500 people in ready status. Now, we normally think of ready status as being the status which means you're about to have an interview. However, as I've been pointing out for some months, this 11,500 number includes a lot of people who are no-shows from previous months, right? From January, from February, from March. These are cases that are never going to show up for their interview, right? And so the real number of people that are still remaining to be interviewed is probably only 2,000 or 3,000 people, because out of the 8,000 that were scheduled for September, the majority of them would already have been interviewed. Probably 5,000 or so would have already been interviewed, because the interviews tend to happen in the earlier parts of the month, unless you have an embassy that's extremely busy, like Nairobi would have had to have used all of its capacity throughout the whole month, right? So there will be interviews happening there until the very end. But in many of the embassies, there won't be much activity after this point, after the middle of the month. So, so it's kind of interesting how badly they've messed this up. They ended up scheduling, probably about the right number of people in a sense, but a lot of those people are not able to get their visas because of the travel ban, and this just isn't. It's not going to work out well. So this number here, they're going to end up wasting, I think, about 4,000 visas, maybe even 5,000, but probably about 4,000 visas. Which would see us getting about 47,000 issued. That's about the number I think that we're going to see. Maybe a bit more than that, but so yeah, getting on for, 4,000 visas will be wasted. It's that sort of number. It's just, dreadful shame. Now, where could those visas have been used? Well, they could have pushed Africa to a higher number, right? Africa would not have taken all of those visas. There's just no way. That you need a lot of interviews to happen in Africa in order to issue, a relatively small amount of visas. That's because there are a lot of no-shows, there are a lot of refusals, and the derivative rate is low, right? And so it takes a lot more people. Just to show you here, for example, 15,000 cases were scheduled, and that equates to under 30,000 people, right? So less than 2 cases two people per case. Less than 2 people per case, right? It's about 1.8, 1.9 typically in Africa at the most. Whereas if you look at, for example, if you look at EU region, we've got a ratio which is more like 2.5, right? So there's more people on every single case on average in the EU region. And then the refusals, are far less in EU than compared to Africa. And 221G is far less, in EU compared to Africa, right? And so it's, so whatever they did, if they pushed the numbers in Africa, by the time they did the final visa bulletin, they wouldn't have used all the quota for Africa, the quota being about 23,000. And so that would have then said, okay, the other regions can enjoy some of those visas. Well, Asia couldn't have taken them very much because you've got, large countries like Iran, particularly Iran, but also Yemen, Afghanistan. You've got those countries banned, right? Travel banned. So they're not going to be able to take those. So EU would have been the major beneficiary of all of that overflow. And that meant that EU could have, we could have had a final visa bulletin in the 30s for EU. And they probably would have, they could have gone to 18, 19,000 quite easily in terms of issuances. Whereas actually right now we're at 16,000. And maybe we'll see that go to 17,000 or 17,500. But it could have gone to 18, 19,000 quite happily. Just a shame, really. Big shame. But anyway, particularly thinking about you, Philip, on that point. Anyway, so that's where we are with the case numbers and the issuance numbers. So let me take some questions, and we'll see what questions you've got on your mind. Theon saying he expected the numbers were too high from the first month. Absolutely. Thanks for doing this. I see the data following your trends reported in the website. Yep. I feel that a big jump will be in January. I don't know if there'll be. We've already had a big jump, right? We've already had the big jump, right? So, I would not be expecting the visa bulletin to be moving very much over the next few months. Like I say, it wouldn't be at all shocking to me if Asia at 10,000 is more than halfway through the number that we get to in the end. It wouldn't be at all shocking to me. All right, so I think we've already had the big jumps. I'm not sure we're going to get big jumps in the future visa bulletins. And actually, that's not a horrible way to do things. I would rather them get lots of cases into the system and being interviewed in the early months. I'd rather them use that capacity earlier in the year so that they're not leaving everything till the end, right? So I'm not hating what they've done. I just think some of you will misunderstand it, which is clearly the case, right? Hi, good morning, Joe. Morning from the East Coast. Serving the nation now. Proud US citizen. Amazing. Ben, hi, Simon. Say hi too. Yep. Passport rule will be reinstated. Good question. We don't know, right? So I've explained about this passport rule. Here's what I've said. The previous time that they implemented the passport rule, a lawyer was able to get the government to retract the passport rule because the government had not rolled out the passport rule in the correct manner. And the correct manner meant that in order to make a change like this, they had to go through a period of time where they sought public comment. Then they would have to decide and modify their systems. And then they would have to give 30 days notice of their intention to change the rule, right? So what they did this time was they released a period of public comment, 45 days, right? And when you add up the 45 days and the 30 days that they're supposed to give after that point before actually making the change, there wasn't enough time for them to implement the passport rule for DV 2027. And so if they implement the passport rule for DV 2027 and they start the entry period at the normal time, then they're opening the door for another lawsuit, basically. So, and I think they must know that because they've got people at least as intelligent as me, right? They must have. I'm not the brightest guy out there. They must have somebody who can add up 45 and 30. They must have somebody who can do that, right? That's all I can do. That's about my limit. So, so assuming they've got someone who's saying the emperor's got no clothes and say, hey guys, you know that last time we got sued for the passport rule, if we do this again in DV 27, we're going to get sued again. Assuming they've got somebody like me that would point out to them, then I don't think they'll implement the passport rule in DV 2027. But the timing of their announcement and the public comment thing and everything was kind of odd if they were not planning to implement it for DV 27, because it was sort of it gave the impression it would be in time, but it wasn't done in time. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. Basically, I don't know, right? I'm very intrigued, and I don't know, whether if they implement the passport rule, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see someone sue the government again, and they'll win. If Curtis wants another winning lawsuit, he could certainly sue the government for that particular decision, because there's a whole set of procedures they're supposed to go through. The Administrative Processing Act, I think it is, the APA, says that if you're going to do these things, you have to ask for public comment, and then you have to give everyone 30 days notice, and you don't have enough time to do that. So, good luck, government, just in case you're thinking of doing that. So we'll have to wait and see. David says, thanks for the video. I've completed my DS 160. I hope not. You're supposed to do your DS 260. When I check the profile, it says completed and status at MVC. Anything else I should do or send the application? Okay, so let's assume you're a DV lottery winner, not another type of immigration, but you're supposed to fill in the DS 260. And when you fill that in and you submit it, the status on the front page goes to completed. When it says completed, your form is submitted, right? KCC can start processing it. And your form is also locked, by the way. So you can go into your form and you can have a look at things, and that doesn't harm at all. You can go and review your answers, etc. No problem with that. But you can't make any changes because your data is locked, right? And if you need to make changes, you have to email KCC and ask them to unlock the form. So as long as it says the word completed, then you have submitted the DS 260. And all you now do is just wait until they've finished processing. And in order to get scheduled for interview, you need to have your DS 260 processed, which can take a few weeks to a few months, right? But that needs to be processed. Your case needs to be current, right? Which means current meaning your number is less than the visa bulletin number, that's shown in the visa bulletin that's active for this month. And so you have to be current, and your embassy needs to have capacity to see you, right? And to see all the other cases that they have in their queue, queue of people in stage 4 or AV status. So those three things have to be true in order for you to get the interview, okay? And other than that, you just wait. The other things you do while you're waiting is some people apply for their police certificates because they know that those police certificates could take a long time to obtain. Some people do that. Some people get their paperwork together. But that's all you should really do. You don't do things like booking the medical until you get the 2NL. The 2NL being the notification that you've got an interview booked on a certain day at the embassy, right? So you don't do the medical until you've had that notification. But you can, if you want to, get the other paperwork together. Your birth certificate, your passport, obviously, your marriage certificate, divorce certificates, your kids' documentation, your spouse's documentation. You can get all of that stuff together, right? And police certificates is probably one of the things that maybe you would apply for early, even before you get the 2NL. The police certificates, by the way, are valid for up to 2 years. So even when it says on the police certificate, the validity of this document is 3 months or 6 months or whatever, the authority, like the police department who are issuing that police certificate, may say that this document is only valid for 3 months, right? But that is not important. The US government will accept that document up to 2 years old. I personally don't recommend using one that's 2 years old, but you can have a police certificate that's a few months old. That's perfectly fine, no problem at all. So you can apply for your police certificate early if you want to. That's the only other thing that, you maybe should do, because it can take a bit of time. Wow, blast from the past, Mantha, how you doing? I hope you're doing good. Listening to you, enjoy my Sunday morning on a walk in Niagara Falls, New York. Wow, wonderful. It must be an amazing walk. I hope the weather's good there at the moment. I think it is, right? Yessa says, hi Simon, we missed you. Why it takes so long processing the DS260? Good question. Let's talk about that for a minute. The first thing in DS260 processing you have to know is that it's okay. Let's dispel a couple of myths, right? some people think that DS260s are only processed in case number order. That isn't true, right? I just saw a case yesterday who's in stage 3, meaning their case is processed, their DS260 is processed, and their case number is Africa 98,000, right? So it does not mean that they only go in case number order. I think there may be some part of the system that kind of helps them prioritize processing for lower case numbers at certain times. But in general, the processing of DS260s is done in the order received, meaning if you sent your DS260 on May 7th, then yours would be opened before those sent on May 15th, right? And so that's why submitting early tends to sort of, get things processed a little faster. However, since a lot of people submit their DS260s in the sort of the May, June, July timeframe, as soon as they find out that they're winner, there's a backlog of work that builds up very quickly at KCC in May. And that means that there are many cases that they don't even open probably for 2 or 3 months that were submitted in May. And so you're sitting there waiting for your DS260 to be processed, and you ask them occasionally, you say to KCC, is my DS260 processed, blah, 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 and it isn't processed. And it could be because you were just in a backlog of, waiting to be, for your DS260 to begin processing. So that's the first thing, right? Then your DS260 will be opened. And when they open your DS260, they do kind of a risk assessment on that DS260. There's a way that they have of weighing up that DS260 to say, is this a risky case or not? Am I concerned about this case? Does it need additional background processing? So what are the things that cause that sort of additional background processing? Well, if you've traveled in the Middle East, for example, if you've lived in a country where there's been some sort of civil war or, some sort of war going on, some of the African countries could experience this. That could be a concern. They might want to be able to, background check a little bit more. If you work with certain technologies, certain weapons of war and mass destruction, for example, if you are a chemical weapon expert from Iran, you can bet your bottom dollar they're going to be opening your DS260 and saying, hey, guys, we need to look at this one. This one's hilarious. There's an Iranian here who's a chemical weapons expert. Of course you're going to be delayed, right? They're going to want to look into, everything to do with your background, right? So, nuclear technologies, particularly those around weaponry, could be avionics, could be computer sciences, IT engineering, those sort of things possibly could put you on a thing called the TAL, the technology alert list. Those things are bad. And maybe you've got none of those factors, but your name happens to match someone who is on a terror watch list, right? Happens to be similar to that. Or maybe one of your distant relatives or distant friends that you're connected to is on a terror watch list, and they've investigated all of the people that person has ever phoned, for example, because they've got all sorts of information. They can figure out who is that person in contact with and that sort of thing. So, maybe they look at those sort of things and for some reason, totally unbeknown to you, you have a connection to someone that is on a terror watch list, and therefore you're going to get further investigation on your DS260. That can happen, right? And it can be the most, bizarre thing that happens, sometimes, because people have said to me, look, I've never, I'm an accountant and I've never been out of my town, and I, completely simple, normal life. But then they experience a long time with DS260 processing. So it can happen. So that's at one end of the scale. Now, the other thing I would say is that not all DS260s, therefore, are processed in the same time. So 2 DS260s that are both submitted, let's say, on May 15th, just a week after the announcement of the results, they're both submitted on the same day. One could be processed, let's say, within 2 months, and the other might take 9 months, right? So it appears very random at times. And so that leads a lot of you to start coming up with crazy theories about things. And it also leads to this sort of misunderstanding about, whether DS-260s are processed in case numbers and that sort of thing. So, it can take a bit of time. Now, I will tell you this at the other end of the extreme. As part of the UK lawsuit, I know of about 15 cases that submitted their DS-260s in order to get interviewed, right, out of the 43 winners. Those cases were processed within 24 to 48 hours. Their DS-260 were processed immediately. But who are we talking about here? We're talking about British people. By definition, they are sort of with a British background, typically. There was the lawsuit pushing that forward. And so unless they opened a DS-260 that had some really, sort of big red flags on it from a security point of view, they were going to say, yeah, just approve that DS-260. So they can, like if they want to, they can do the DS-260 processing in a couple of days, right? They can just pass it straight through. And if you're from one of the Western European countries, for example, if you're from Australia or New Zealand or, some innocuous country out there, Switzerland or something, couldn't get more innocuous than that, right? If you're from one of those countries, then, and you've got a relatively simple background, then you're probably going to get fast processing, DS-260 processing. But YASA, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be sort of like rude here or anything. I'm just saying your name, YASA Foward. There's a high chance that you would match someone on a terror watch list, because American psyche is worried about Muslim terrorism and that sort of thing. Islamic terrorism, I should say. But so, there's a high chance that there's another Yasser on the list, right? And, perhaps with the same last name. So, it wouldn't be a surprise if your DS-260 took longer simply for that. And it could be a complete coincidence and nothing to do with you at all, but it's the way it works sometimes. So there you go. Aditya says, will they likely increase some amount in the next month? Yeah, maybe. There might be a little bit of an increase in the visa bulletin next month, or there might be a complete freeze again. A complete freeze wouldn't surprise me. And if you looked at my visa bulletin history, you can see that sometimes they'll publish a number, they'll freeze it for the next month, then they increase the next month after that, then they freeze that one again in the fourth month, and so on. So it doesn't, sometimes it doesn't look like there's any sort of rhyme or reason to it. I have explained the reason for these numbers before. I won't go into it now, but suffice it to say, at this time of the year, they don't have very much feedback in the system. So when they pulled these numbers out of the sky, like Asia 10,000, that was just pulled out of the sky. There was no reason for that. And there was no embassies that had the capacity to take cases up to 10,000 if they truly had all of those people processed. So, it was a bit nuts. Okay, Andrea Studios. How will Passport reduce the fraud entries? How big are they in numbers in the fake entries? We know that the fraudulent entries are around about 10% of the total number of entries. And we know that because of various lawsuits and various information. In fact, just recently in one of the lawsuits, they gave a number that I think it was a DV24, maybe for DV25. They rejected 2.5 million entries, so a bit more than 10% actually in that year. For double entries, fraudulent entries, that sort of thing. So it's a fair number. But in DV25, that 57% of all of the case numbers in the winning ranges were holes, right? 57.4%, I think it is. So it's a staggering number of cases are actually disqualified. Some of those are disqualified because of fraudulent entries. Some of them are disqualified for other reasons. The other major reason, and frankly the biggest reason, is for photos. And that's the problem I know I can solve. So that's why you're going to hear an announcement on that over the next week or so, couple of weeks. But yeah, photos is the biggest reason, but fraud is the next biggest reason why holes are created between the case numbers. And for those of you that don't know, holes, what am I talking about with holes? Let's say they've got cases from number 1 to number 10 in a region, every cases. There are not 10 cases in that range from 1 to 10. There are some number less than that. And in the case of DV25, for example, nearly 60% of those, so 6 out of the 10, let's say, would have been holes. That means there's only 4 real cases in those first 10 numbers, right? So you can see the impact of what that means. So if you're sitting there with case number 20,000 in Asia, you're probably thinking there are 19,999 real cases in front of you, when in fact there are a lot less than that, a lot less case numbers than that in front of you at that number, right? So that's why holes are important. But anyway, so the passport rule makes it harder for people to do fraudulent entries. It restricts the number of fraudulent entries. It also just dissuades people from entering. And this is my point to people who think that the passport rule is a good thing. It really isn't. So yes, they dissuade a lot of those fraudulent entries. That 10% number goes down without a doubt. And that's a good thing, right? But if you look at the way that the numbers dropped in the 2 years where the entry was using the passport rule, the numbers dropped dramatically. They dropped by like 50%. So there are people being excluded because of the fraud, but there are also people being excluded because they didn't have a passport at that time. And why would they? Like, why would people have a passport if they're living in a poor country? And just making $3,000 or $4,000 a year? Why the hell would people like that be spending money on a passport? They're not going away for cruises and vacations and stuff, right? And some of my listeners, particularly Europeans, can't understand that. Oh God, there are people who don't have passports. I mean, that's just ridiculous. How can you not have a passport? I'm constantly driving to other countries and going over here and taking a quick mini break in Luxembourg or whatever. Of course you are. You live in freaking Europe and you've got plenty of money. But if you live in some of these poorer countries, you don't have the money. You barely have the money to pay for life's necessary expenses, life's necessities, let alone getting a passport so you can go on a bloody vacation. Come on, use a little bit of empathy. Use a little bit of common sense and realize that, yes, it unnecessarily impacts people, who are supposed to have an opportunity to enter this lottery and shouldn't necessarily spend a lot of money on getting a passport that they probably have no other reason to obtain. So anyway, whatever. Some of you will argue. In fact, most of the public comments, I have to say, most of the public comments are in support of the passport rule. So it will be implemented at some point. Maybe not for DV27, but probably for DV28. Because, people like it for whatever reason. Can I apply for lottery with my brother or it will affect our chances? Ashraf, what do you mean with your brother? No, you must not include anybody on your entry that is not a legitimate spouse or derivative child, right? When you enter the lottery, you have to follow the rules. If you don't follow the rules, you're going to get disqualified later, and you're going to waste a lot of time and money dreaming about being a lottery winner, and then you're going to get disqualified. So how on earth would you think you could include your brother? I assume your brother is a young child, and you're going to include that brother, pretending that brother is a child of yours? Like, what? Are you nuts? Why would you do that? Like, that's ridiculous. Now, if your family situation is such that says you are somehow responsible for your brother, and you would not want to leave to America, or you couldn't leave to America without taking your brother, then the answer is probably don't enter the DV lottery, right? Because if you literally can't leave because it would be bad for your child brother, then don't enter the lottery that would not force you, but make you want to leave to go to America, unless you feel that you can help your brother by going to America earning a ton of money and sending money home so that your brother at least has the necessities. But if you are responsible for looking after your brother, then don't enter the bloody lottery, because you can't take your brother in the lottery process, right? So, but don't include anybody in your lottery entry that you're not legally required or allowed to enter into the lottery. So, we'll talk about this as the lottery period becomes a bit closer, but you must include your spouse if you're married, but don't include your spouse if you're not married. If you're just, on a informal arrangement of living together, don't include your spouse. If you've got children, whether those children are your biological children or whether they are stepchildren or whether they're adopted children, you must include those children on your entry. And it doesn't matter if those kids are away at school and you can't get a photo and everything else. Don't enter the bloody lottery if you can't take care of getting a photo of those derivative children, because you will be disqualified later. Being selected and going through the whole process and spending the money on the fees and dreaming for a year that you're going to be going to America and everything else is far worse, in my opinion, than not being selected at all. Not being selected in the beginning because you didn't enter the lottery is like, it's disappointing. But it's far worse to go through that whole process and lose a bunch of money and time and everything else and then be disqualified because you did a stupid thing like not reading the rules when you entered the lottery. So don't enter the lottery unless you can follow the rules properly. Okay. Web Fiji. Hey, Simon, I think you may have received this question a lot. If somebody has traffic citations, including DUI, how should I answer the question? Have you ever been arrested or convicted of any offense or crime, even though subject to a pardon, amnesty, or similar action? Okay. Let's talk about the sort of crimes that they're talking about here. Now, so there is a definition in immigration law called crime of moral turpitude. CIMT is often shortened to CIMT, crime involving moral turpitude. And what they mean by that is a crime that is serious enough or of the type where it says something about your morality, right? Your moral behavior. Now, if I go out and I'm driving the car and I go through a speeding trap, I'm driving my car too fast. Does that make me the worst person in the world? Does that mean I'm immoral, that I'm unable to follow rules of society? Not really. I was just speeding my car, right? I drove too fast. Forgive me, fine me, whatever. That's not a CIMT. That's not a crime involving moral turpitude, right? On the other hand, if I go out with DUI can be of different levels. Let's say I'm a little bit drunk. I go out and the police stop me, but I haven't crashed into anybody. I just, I'm just over the limit. It's serious. I'm not saying it's not serious, but it's not necessarily yet a CIMT. If, on the other hand, I go in my car drunk, I crash into another car, and God forbid I kill some child or something, then yes, you're ineligible for immigration into the USA because of that crime of moral turpitude, right? And the same thing can be said for certain other criminal activities, right? So if I might, maybe I've done, well, I got to be a bit careful with this because some of these things are a bit weird, but maybe I've done some sort of crime, but it's a minor crime. It's a trivial crime. It's not a big crime, right? Then that might not be a CIMT. But if I robbed a bank with a shotgun, then yeah, that's probably a bad thing, right? And so it's not just what crime you did; it's the sort of the severity of that crime to an extent, or certain crimes which are just considered to be serious crimes where it's clear that you're just not someone who will behave properly in the USA, and that's why they don't want you to be here. So if you want to find out a little bit more, maybe do a little bit of research on, if you've got something like a DUI, you can research whether that would be a crime of moral turpitude or not, and if necessary, speak to a lawyer if you have some sort of criminal case, or you have some sort of case which you feel is important enough and you're concerned about that, speak to a lawyer and get a lawyer to sort of give you an opinion on whether your crime, whatever that is serious enough or of the type that would be a crime of moral turpitude. That's probably worth doing before you go through the whole process, right? The last part of this, you say being arrested or convicted for any offense or crime. So again, just understand this isn't a normal arrest. This isn't like me being tipsy one night in the outside the pub and being arrested and spending the night in the jail for my own good, which has happened. It's not like that. That would not be a crime of moral turpitude, and that probably wouldn't even appear on my criminal record. That's just me being an idiot and being drunk on the streets, and therefore, my British police friends taking care of me for the night. That could happen. I'm not saying it did. I'm just saying it could happen. When I was younger, not recently. Those things, that's not really the sort of thing they're looking for. They're asking for, okay, well, you're arrested for something more serious, etc. It depends on what it is. Now, whenever you get these questions, be honest in the way you answer them, right? Because it's going to be on your criminal record. And perhaps if you've got one of these situations, by the way, apply for your police certificate before you fill out the DS-260 so that you can see what your police certificate is going to say before you answer that question on the DS-260. Because maybe you're worried about some sort of arrest that happened because you were a silly boy when you were 17 years old or something, and you stole a Lego set or whatever, right? And so maybe you're worried about that. Maybe you think that's going to affect your chances. Well, get your police certificate first and see if that's even mentioned on your police certificate. Because if it isn't on there, why would you even raise it, right? So, because it was obviously too trivial. You may be racked with guilt about it, and you may think it was important, but actually the police certificate doesn't even show it, let's say, right? So the CO doesn't need to know about that. In general, honesty is the best policy, without a doubt, but don't give yourself a headache where you don't need to, right? Okay. We are still current in Kenya, Nairobi, AF 30,000. I think, Ben, you've got to understand that your year is over, right? They're not going to schedule any more interviews in the last couple of months here. The last couple of weeks for DV25. I'm afraid that's it. Nairobi did an amazing September month. They took a lot of people, about 1,000 people were scheduled for interview. But there is a limit to their capability, and clearly, we're not still seeing 2NLs being sent out for any embassies in DV25, right? Outside of lawsuits and very exceptional situations. Okay. How the ban going to help other Asian region selectees? Well, it's kind of an unfortunate way to ask the question. But it is true that if you're in a non-banned country within a region where there's a lot of people banned, then your chance of being processed and getting your visa goes up a little bit, right? It's not the way you would want to win the race, perhaps, but it is a reality. And so, yes, bans in some regions will help the processes go to higher case numbers. It'll leave more visas for other people. There's a couple of things I would say, though. Even a person who's from a travel banned country is still going to get their DS-260 processed, and they're still going to be scheduled for an interview. And so, that doesn't necessarily take away all of the work from the system. There is still some work to do in the system. Why do they do that? Well, that person may have an exemption from the ban. That person might have a second citizenship and passport, for example. Maybe exempt in some other way, although that's not very likely. But there are exemptions, and so it's only by giving someone the interview that you give them the right to go and make their case to say why they should be exempted from the travel ban. And so they go ahead and they process the cases and they give people the interviews. So that doesn't mean it's to the, where is it, to the universe and beyond, or whatever it is, to infinity and beyond. There you go. It doesn't mean that the visa bulletin numbers are going to go rocket sky high, but it does help things a little bit move along. Now, and then the other point I'd make is the travel bans could be removed theoretically at any point, right? There was some excitement when the travel bans were introduced, that people counted the days and they figured out that, the 9th of September, the travel ban was going to be taken away. That was always bullshit. I told people it was always bullshit. That wasn't going to happen, but some people believed it. And sure enough, it didn't happen. Lo and behold, it did not happen, right? So, but at some point, maybe the government decided to take away the travel ban. Maybe they believe that, we were nasty people, before, but now we're going to be nice people. If you believe that, you believe in fairies. But let's say it could happen in some way. Maybe there'd be some pressure on the government to remove some of the travel bans, or I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But that could also happen, right? Hi Simon, we've been hearing some rumors that all immigrants and non-immigrant visa applications must apply in their country of nationality. Is that true? It's not a rumor. I've published an article about it. I did a video about it. It's not rumors really, but anyway, yes, there's been a couple of announcements, changes in policy, that explain that people need to interview in their country of residence first. Residence. Where are you resident? Where do you live? Right? Or their country of nationality. And those policies have been applied to both immigrant and non-immigrant visas. And the idea is that they don't want people sort of, flying all over the place, going to interviews, in all sorts of different countries. They don't want what we call embassy shopping. So I explained that a couple of weeks ago when the policy was introduced. You can read about that on my BritSimonSays.com blog. You can read an article where I've explained all of that. It's unfortunate, but I hope, and I think I said in the blog article, I hope what it means is that they've said to the embassies, look, you all need to organize yourselves properly to cope with the volume of work you've got locally. And we're going to stop all the people traveling. So let's just take Turkey as an example. Classic situation where Ankara embassy for some years has been disappointing people both locally and also the Iranian applicants that have been going there for interview. And they're people have been current to 30, 40,000 or whatever, but not able to get an interview because Ankara embassy wouldn't see them. It's been incredibly unfair and cruel, and so a lot of people have just got into the habit of embassy shopping straight away and going to other embassies, right? And the government is trying to stop that going on. They would rather that everybody is interviewed where they live, right? That's okay. I'm okay with that decision only if that means that Ankara embassy, for example, are being told that they have to cope with all of the activity locally and that they are scaling up their operations to be able to do that, and therefore will be more fair with people waiting for interviews there, whether those are Iranians or other Asians or Europeans, mainly from Turkey, right? No embassy, by the way, is reserved for the people of the local area. That's not how this works. It's not because you're Turkish that you get some sort of preference in Ankara. That was never right. That shouldn't happen. But what they are saying now is that if you're resident there, or if you're assigned there because of through no fault of your own, like Iranian applicants, then you should be able to interview there and only there, right? Fine. Then increase the capacity, right? So I'm hoping that the announcement has come with a background conversation that says, yeah, we've got to do a better job of making the capacity available. If they continue their bad behavior in some of those embassies, which just ignore people, from month to month to month, then, that's not fair. If you're a DV winner that happens to live in Nigeria, for example, your embassy is Lagos, right? Lagos embassy. Lagos haven't taken a DV case in years. They haven't interviewed anybody in years, and they're not going to start now. So how fair is it to say to someone who happens to live in Nigeria, perhaps they're from Benin or Ghana or whatever, but they happen to live in Nigeria, and unbeknownst to them, they don't know that the Lagos embassy is not going to see them. And so they just fill in their DS-260 saying, yeah, I live in Nigeria. And that's it. That's the end of their chance, because the local embassy won't take their case. I mean, that's not fair. Of course, that's not fair. That's ridiculous. And so, you know, hopefully these background issues are being solved. But I have to say that's an extremely optimistic view. I don't really believe they're going to solve all those background problems. Not in the first year, put it like that. What's the possibility of passport? We already talked about it. Jurist family already talked about. Hello, Simon. I'm asking KCC for a transfer, but there's no answer. They keep answering, we are reviewing a request, and I didn't provide any evidence yet because I don't know what they need. Yeah, I can't. Your question is a little vague. All I can say is you've got to keep trying, right? Keep trying with them. I hope you're not talking about a DV25 case. If you're talking about a DV25 case, then it's really late in the day to get transferred, and you know you're leaving it too late. But keep pushing with KCC. Hopefully, it's a DV26 case. What could be the reason my application is still ready after my interview last week until now, and the applicants in later days got their visas issued and printed? Councillor told me I'm approved. It doesn't necessarily mean anything bad. Don't worry about it. Just be patient. It's sometimes they're just the embassy forget to update that status. They don't have to update that status as part of their process. It's just something they're supposed to do, and so maybe they just forgot. They're human. Sometimes they make mistakes. It doesn't mean that there's a problem in your case necessarily, right? Just relax, be patient, okay? Daily Plugs says, hello, Simon. Do you think there's a higher possibility of the passport rule being introduced, blah, blah, blah? Hey, I'm here for testimony. I'm not asking for testimony. Sounds like a court case. Faisal Bagram says, hi, sir. As you know, the lottery is a law, and Donald Trump can't stop issuing the visas for travel ban country with his order. He can only stop their entry into the US. Yeah, thanks for telling me something that I know, and I know that because I was involved in the DV 2020 and DV 2021 cases, which fought exactly that point you're talking about. So, of course, I know that, Faisal. So, yeah, you're right, but the president has the power to stop entry, and you know, and that does not mean, should not mean, and we won the point in DV 2020 that that it doesn't mean that the government stopped processing and issuing visas. However, the government never really accepted that part of the lawsuit win in DV 2020. They appealed it, and so they continued to disagree, and that part of the appeal was never settled. And so that's still an open question to an extent. And I know it's a question that Curtis Morrison is currently fighting in another lawsuit. And there may be other lawsuits trying to fight that as well. But that's the situation. As of now, the government are continuing to not issue visas based on the travel ban, which I think is probably the wrong behavior, but it's their decision that they've made, and that, you know, sometimes they say things like, here's how we're going to operate, sue us if you don't like it, right? So that's all we can do. We can sue, we can take them to court, but it doesn't mean that we're going to win that argument, or that we can win that argument within the time frame. That's the problem. I was DV 24 winner. Based on your advice, I transferred my case from Ethiopia to Kenya. Now I'm in the US. Thanks a lot. Thank goodness. Yeah, isn't that funny? So at the time, you know, in DV24, Ethiopia wasn't behaving well, and Kenya was, and so you were able to move your case. Now look at the situation. For a while, Nairobi stopped operating well, and actually has disappointed a lot of people. Ethiopia has performed better in DV25, and now, of course, what you did moving from one embassy to another would be much more difficult these days because of the recent announcement. Things are changing year to year, so the advice will change year to year, and the actions that you take will change year to year. The one thing that has been consistent is that if you want to change where you're going to get interviewed, the reliable way to do that is to move to another country. Right now, I obviously understand how difficult that can be. But if your DS-260 says you live in country B, where up to now you've been in country A, then you will be scheduled in country B. Okay, so just think about that. And I've been telling people this advice for years. Some of you have gone around different ways, and sometimes it's worked and sometimes it hasn't. But what has always worked is that if you move to another country and your DS-260 says your current address is in this other country, then as long as you're not creating a lie, which you can be caught out with, then that's a reliable way to be assigned to a different embassy. Okay. Photo app is not available yet, but it will be shortly. It's not an app, by the way. Somebody asked me this question last week, and I'm glad they did. Excuse me, I'm glad they did. It's a web page, not an app. And we did that because it's going to be more available to more people. We're also working on the thing that we're delayed with at the moment, or not delayed, but the reason that it's not published yet is that we're working on the most flexible payment system we can get. Because payments are difficult to take worldwide from all the different systems, in some countries there's different ways to do things, but it's not going to be perfect. And there may be some places where you won't be able to use the app, I'm afraid, or the web page because of payments. But you'll see when you see the way we've set it up, there is still an advantage of using the page. I've made it as useful as I can make it, and we have erred on the side of not making a ton of money or trying to get rich quick or anything like that. We're making the price very, very low compared to the technology that we're using. The price is low, and you actually get the advice, if you like. You get the help from the thing before you've even paid any money. So there's a bit of a clue for you. You'll understand better when I show you the app. So it's going to be a good thing. I mean, I'm very, very pleased with how it is, and I hope many of you will use it and support us, because we have invested money in it. But it's coming from the heart, not from the wallet. Why I've done this is important, and it's going to be helpful. So I hope you'll support it. Anyway, we'll see. Theon, how in-depth do you think they're going into the social media scanning? Bear in mind, there are no humans doing this, right? So when you have social media scanning and that sort of thing, and you have background checks and everything else, it's generally speaking not human-involved stuff that's going on. It's programmatically done. And they're building up networks. When you're talking about social media, it's like, okay, they're going to see which social media networks you are involved in, and then investigate to an extent programmatically your activity and see what your political leanings might be, for example, or what sort of activities you might be involved in. But that's done programmatically, right? And so when you're writing programs to do things, you're not worried about the computer getting tired. So you go to the depth that you can go to, because it's just programming, right? So it will be pretty in-depth as far as it can go, right? I mean, there's limits to what you can do by having limited access to someone's social media accounts. There's limits to what you can do, but they are the government, and they have got more access to information than sometimes we might imagine they have, right? So so I suppose the simple answer is I don't know, right? I don't know exactly what their methods are, but I can imagine that what they're doing. I remember seeing 10 or 15 years ago in my professional work, systems that were able to put together social media profiles for employment applications. So as we were getting employment applications in, we were scanning at that time, scanning those resumes, and then building an online profile for social media. I want to say 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. But those things were available 10 years ago. Imagine what they're like today, right? It would be much better, right? So yeah, I should imagine there's some depth to it. Duba Yepa, visa after September 30th, which is the last day of 25 winners. What does that mean? If you're asking, can you get a visa after September 30th? No, you can't be approved for a DV25 visa after September 30th, 2025. Can't be approved. What can happen is you could go for an interview on the 30th, let's say, as late as the 30th, any day up to and including the 30th. You could be approved on that day before midnight locally. Before midnight, you could be approved. And then the visa could be printed a couple of days later. That precise situation happened in Mumbai embassy a couple of years ago. I think it was in DV22. They sent out 2 NLs on the 29th of September to about half a dozen people. And people showed up for interviews the next day on the 30th. The people were taken to a doctor. They were told to go to this doctor to have their medical. Then they went to the embassy, and the embassy stayed open until almost midnight, I believe, issuing the last of the cases. Getting all the paperwork together and issuing or approving those cases. And then the visas were printed in the following days. Okay, so those things can happen. Now, the other question sometimes people ask me is, if I have a visa printed on September 1st or something, it's got it's got an expiry date of, let's say, February the 14th, Valentine's Day next year. But do I have to travel to the USA before September 30th? No, you don't have to go before September 30th. You have until the expiry date on the visa. And that expiry date is 6 months after your medical date, right? So you typically have your medical a couple of weeks before the interview. And whatever the date of your medical is, they add 6 months to that, and that becomes the expiry date of your visa. Okay, that's how it all works. Okay. DV27 is a possibility. Yes, it's a certainty. The government have not and cannot cancel the DV lottery. That has to be, if they were to try and cancel it, for example, it would have to be through an act of law. They would have to pass a bill through both houses and then signed by the president. And nobody's doing that right now. And with all the mess going on, they're not going to get to that. The DV lottery is going to continue through Trump's reign. So, yeah. Any update on the UK lawsuit for DV26 and 27? Right. The lawsuit that I have was in my daughter's name, and my daughter was only a DV25 entrant, not a DV26 entrant, which means that the scope of that lawsuit initially, we made it very clear it was for both years in the complaint, but her standing isn't there for DV26. And so we're adding some additional plaintiffs to the case in order to make sure we've got standing. And I think the next sort of report or hearing date is something like the 24th of September. Before that date, you'll see that we file a new amendment to the case. We've got an amendment coming, which will add some people onto that case and also include a bit more information. I'm going to add in, for example, the fact that they are not publishing the selectee data. I want to make it clear that that is hiding from us information that may or may not be helpful to our lawsuit. And therefore, that might be one of the possible reasons why they're doing that. That's a possibility, right? And so, anyway, so the lawsuit will be amended shortly in the next week or so. And when it's amended, it will then be very clearly fighting DV26, because the government admitted their mistake in DV25. Because of the lawsuit, they admitted the mistake and they fixed DV25. But at the same time, they came back and said they didn't think they'd made any mistake in DV26, which we know is bullshit. And so, and my complaint already had
proof that they'd made the mistakes in DV26. There's Cuban selectees in DV26. There shouldn't be any Cuban selectees in DV26. So they've obviously screwed up DV26, right? So we're going to get this fixed. The lawsuit will continue until we've got the right result, right? And I'm enjoying suing Trump, so don't worry, I'm not stopping. And Curtis loves a good fight, especially one where he's able to win so easily. I mean, Curtis would fight just for the laugh anyway. I mean, he loves a good fight. He's a bulldog. I'm sure the government must absolutely hate him at times because he's just not going to let things go. He and I are continuing to fight that lawsuit. It will affect DV26. And of course, because we've pointed this out, it therefore is going to mean that they will fix the problem for DV27. And if they don't, we'll sue them for that too. So yeah, don't worry, it'll be fixed. I'm 100% sure we're going to win that, by the way, 100%. There's no doubt in my mind we're going to win the DV26 part of this claim. No doubt in my mind. Hello, DV25. The consulate requested a different police certificate. I submitted on September 10th. Still no change in my status or date, only 2 weeks left. Is there a way to speed up the process in Gangsu? Look, it's the 14th. You waited a whole 4 days. Come on, give them some time. You've given them that certificate. They weren't just sitting there on the 10th saying, oh, I wonder where Alex is with that police certificate. Oh, we've got nothing else to do. We're just waiting for Alex. And so, when the police certificate showed up, they're like, hey, everybody, we got the police certificate from Alex. Oh, we can continue with our work. That's not what happened, Alex. Come on. They're probably busy. And when you sent that thing in, it hit a pile of papers and they'll get to it, right? But, I can't tell you how long that's going to take. Is there a way to speed up the process? You can email them, maybe. And it might help, but that's about it. That's about all you can do. There's only 2 weeks left, so you don't have very long to wait. So just be patient. Hello, Britt. Does it affect my visa if there's one spelling error in local language on the name in the passport, but the English one is correct? Probably not. Yeah, probably not. It's not ideal, put it like that. The English one is correct. That's probably what they're going to go by. And they may not notice the local language spelling mistake, but it's kind of weird that you've got an official document, a passport, that's got those errors in it. It's kind of weird. So yeah, it's kind of strange. Personally, I wouldn't accept a passport that had errors in it. Okay, let me take some more questions. I'll try and rush through a few, and then we'll call it a day. Right? I won the DV Lottery 2020, and due to COVID-19, didn't travel, but finally I'm in the USA. Is it possible to get the green card? Not possible from your DV 2020 win. No, that timed out. Right? Now you're in the USA. You don't tell me how you're in the USA, but no, you'll get no further benefit from the DV 2020 win. There was a period of time where there were visas reserved. As you know, we had 9,095 visas reserved for DV 2020 to be issued later, but the government appealed that decision by Judge Mehta, and in the end, they won that part of the decision that those reserved visas could not be issued later on, right? So there's no way you can benefit from that DV 2020 win now. DV 2020, 2021, and so on, they're gone. Those years are gone, right? There's nothing you can do. Okay. Hello, Simon. I'm 2026 AF 1200. There's what's your 2NL prediction month? You're already current, right? So your ability to get or your likelihood and timing of getting a 2NL depends on when your DS-260 is processed, when your number is current, which your number is current, and your embassy, right? Well, I don't know which embassy you're at. I don't know whether your DS-260 is processed or not. So, and all I know is your number is current. Well, you know your number is current, right? So you know as much as I do. So how am I supposed to predict your 2NL month? I don't know. I have no information on which to do that, right? A man says, Hi Simon, I'm DV selectee for 26, and after filing DS260, I forgot to print my DS260 form to see all my personal details. Is there any way to check my DS260 personal details? Yeah, you can go back into your form, you can open it, and you can scroll through every page. You can do that, and you can print it if you want. There's no harm in that. As long as it says completed, it's locked, right? But locked doesn't mean you can't read it. You can read it. You can go into it, okay? A man says, hi Simon, after being selected for DV26, I've married my girlfriend and added her in my DS260. So will we get our visas? Yes, as long as they believe the marriage is genuine, then you should be fine. Your girlfriend / now wife needs her own DS260 as well, by the way. I'm hoping you did that. So you use the add applicant button and make sure she's got a DS260 of her own. But yeah, loads of people do that, and it's fine. Not a problem. As long as you're not doing some sort of fraud, it's fine. DD, Simon, could you please tell me if my 3-year-old daughter smiles in the photo? Is there a problem? We can barely make her sit for a photo. Yeah, they're a bit more lenient with kids, but yeah, a 3-year-old, you should be able to instruct a 3-year-old to not smile. Or get a photo. You should be able to do that, DD. With babies, there is a technique for taking a photo of a baby by standing over a baby when the baby is lying on a white sheet. You stand over the baby and you take a photo from above. And they're particularly lenient with infant photos. With a child of 3 years old, you should be able to get the child to not smile, right? Tell them a sad story. Tell them they're not going to get any candy today or something, right? And they'll go, and then perfect. When they're going like that, then you take a photo, and then you give them the candy, right? So yeah, you can get a photo. But yeah, you tire the kid out, play with the kid, tire the kid out, make the kid sad if you have to, and then take the photo. There you go. Done. AP, Brit Simon, any news on Brits getting selected for DV26? Yeah, none have been selected yet that I know of. And I half expected to see the visa bulletin published this month with UK numbers on the selectee numbers, but we didn't get the selectee numbers. So, don't quite know what that means. I discussed that earlier. But anyway, we will have Brits selected for DV26. Don't forget, we're not talking about a lot of winning cases here. If you look at let me just show you something here. Visa bulletin. Some of you may think, if they add the UK, that's going to be thousands of extra selectees. It's nothing like. It's not very many selectees. Not very many cases. So let me show you this. Here we go. Right. So if we look at Europe for DV25 to get an idea of how many cases are selected each year, let's have a look at Europe for a second, and we'll look at similar sort of countries in Western Europe. Right. France had 275 people selected. Now, 275 people is about 110 cases, 120 cases, right, in France. That's all for France. How about for Spain? Spain had 142 people, right? That's people, not cases. So cases, maybe 70 cases, something like that, 60 cases for all of Spain, right? Spain's a lot of people, right? So France and Spain are both similar sized countries to the UK. Italy, 263 people. So again, maybe 120 cases, it's Italy, so larger families, probably 100 cases, right? Not very many cases. So I'm not expecting there to be thousands of UK winners in DV26. In DV25, they gave us the winning cases up to case number 23,000, so 23,000 and below. And there were 43 cases, which consisted of about 100 people. So if they'd have gone to the full number range, maybe we'd have got about 200 winning people. So the number here should have said something like 200 for the UK. So we'll have about that. But So, it may be like 100 winning cases, let's say in DV26, with 250 people on it. That would be about the size of selection I would expect at most. It's not going to be much more than that. It's not going to be thousands, right? So it's not very many people, but I don't care if it's not very many. There needs to be some, right? Okay, Yog. My visa got issued due to ongoing situation here in Nepal. I was wondering if I was going to hear from someone from Nepal. I haven't received any email to pick up my passport and visa yet. Yeah, everything is going normal now. How long do I need to wait now? Okay, so yeah, things have gone back to normal. You know more about the local situation than I do, right? So you're telling me that things are back to normal. Okay, then in good time there'll be the visa printed. Now, obviously the the US government were not really involved in the recent chaos, right? So hopefully none of their systems were impacted, none of their capabilities to print visas and that sort of thing were affected, so it should be okay. And generally speaking, I think in Nepal, you tend to go to a bank, if I remember correctly, you go to a bank to pick up your visa, something like that, right? And as long as that bank wasn't affected, then the systems are probably still in place. So yeah, be a bit patient, wait for a week or two, and hopefully you'll be back in business. Okay. Also, I did my high school here in Nepal, 21. Can I study bachelor with almost 4 or 5 years gap? Yes, you can. I don't know why you're asking me that, though, Yogi. You're asking whether you can study a bachelor's degree in the USA? Yeah, you can do that. The universities here are generally for-profit organizations, which means they're expensive, right? So they are more than happy to sell you, a place on one of their degree programs. They don't care. You've waited 4 or 5 years. No problem at all. Okay, Leo says, hi Simon, AF7K. I've not received 2NL so far. KCC told me last month that my case has been processed and is ready to be scheduled. Chance to receive 2NL this month, Embassy, Abidjan. Yeah, so you've got a chance. I just don't know what the capacity is at your embassy, and that's what is the question mark now, right? How many spaces did they make available for October interviews and then also now for November interviews? I don't know that answer, so just be patient. You're getting there. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to wait many, many months even to become current. So, it seems a bit churlish to talk about, when you're going to be interviewed. Just be a bit patient, okay? Hello, sir. I have my interview appointments tomorrow. Good luck. Make sure you're well prepared. Make sure you've read the instructions, please, and take all the documents. Okay. Good luck with that. And only answer the questions, by the way. Let me go back there. Only answer the questions you're asked. Don't sit there and yabber your mouth talking about a bunch of unnecessary shit. Just answer the questions that you're asked and nothing more than that, right? They say, how long have you been married? 3 years. What you don't say is, when they say, how long have you been married? Oh, well, we met at an ice cream parlor in 1978. And we dated for a long time, and I didn't really like her as much as she liked me. They're not interested in any of that crap, right? You don't give them your life history when you're answering a simple question. They say, how long have you been married? And you say the answer. 3 years, 5 years, whatever is the answer. Okay? Just that. People think this is sometimes the consular officers are very friendly. They want to relax you. They want to be, they want to be nice. They're not trying to be nasty to you or anything. But that friendliness shouldn't be misunderstood to sit and think you're going to have a nice cup of tea with them and have a nice chat for the next hour or two. They want to get your interview done in the next 5 minutes. They want to get to the questions they want to get to, and they want to get you out of there. They want to see the next person. They've got work to do. They don't want to hear all the crap that you want to say. Right? Just focus on answering the questions simply. And when you answer the questions simply, you don't give them, by mistake, other information that makes them think, that doesn't make sense. That part of the question, they said they met in 1978. Whatever nonsense I'm making up here. But do you see my point? By giving them too much information, you might lead them to ask other questions that might give you problems. So just shut your mouth, right? Answer the questions, shut your mouth, and just wait for the next question, okay? You don't have to be rude. You just have to be concise in your answers. Just answer the questions you're asked and nothing more, okay? Hi, Britt. I'd like to know how the US Embassy in Dublin has been doing over the years with issuing 2NLs. Normally fine. You can have a look at the data at dvcharts.zarthisius.xyz. You can go and have a look at that data. But yes, it's normally okay. It's fine. Hi, Britt. Do you have any information or statistics that no one applied more than 10 times for DV lottery? Everyone has been selected before they applied 10 times. No, bullshit. There's your chance of selection in the lottery, apart from the Oceania region, your chance of selection is about 1 in 100, roughly. Sometimes it's less than that. And so there are many people who've applied for more than 10 times, 20 times sometimes. I can show you people's signature in forums where people have been applying consistently year after year after year for 10 and 20 years and never been selected, and they never will be selected. Not because there's something bad about them or anything. It's just that will happen to some people. Some people will try many, many times and never be selected. The DV lottery is an amazing, lucky event, but it's not a plan. You can't plan, I'm going to emigrate to America and I'm going to use the DV lottery to do it. I'm going to enter next year and I'm going to win. You can't make that as a plan, right? It's just a lucky chance. It's just random chance. That's all it is. Fubdem. Hi, upon receiving unexpected pregnancy, my wife is due for delivery on 27th of September this year. Our interview is scheduled on the 17th of October. Is it possible for us to seek postponement? Why would you postpone? Why do you want to postpone? Your baby is going to be probably 2 to 3 weeks old at that point. It's fine. I know babies at 2 to 3 weeks old are not walking. I get that. But why would you need to postpone? You're going to have the baby. Your wife is going to recover within, for young people, they're up and about. Mothers are up and about within a day or two. And the baby will be fine. And you can go to the interview with the baby. You need a birth certificate for the baby and a passport for the baby. If you don't have the passport yet, that's okay. You can follow up with the passport, but just keep with your existing appointment. There's no need to postpone. Web Fiji, a small trick for those who are getting constant timeout. Oh, this is interesting. For DS260 form this weekend, use the Edge browser, but in Internet Explorer mode. Oh, interesting. It worked for me, so hopefully it helps someone else. That's interesting. So yeah, there was somebody else who said they were getting constant timeouts in the DS260. I think there might be some sort of problem going on this weekend. So yes, good tip there. Edge browser, so the Edge browser on Windows machines, but in Internet Explorer mode, kind of a backwards compatibility mode. Sometimes people switch into incognito mode as well. That's sometimes a useful trick that works. Okay. I've already talked about that one. Nathan, Nairobi, DV26. Inputted Dar es Salaam Embassy in my DS260. With the new rule, what should I do? Well, they'll schedule you in Kenya. You'll be assigned to Kenya based on your address. The fact that you selected a different embassy won't matter to them. It'll be based on your address where you live. Okay. Hi, sir, from Togo. My DS260 has been already sent. Now I'm trying to get another passport from another. Okay, there's no question there. Nat Nail says, I emailed KCC. I'm at stage 4. When do you think my case will be called for an interview? If I'm from Ethiopia and case number around 3K, what about 2NL? Again, just like I answered to somebody else a few moments ago, I don't know the embassy's capacity, right? So I can't really predict that. Maybe it will be in the next couple of weeks. When the visa bulletin is published, as it was this week on Friday, 2NLs are expected to start sort of within a day or so of that happening. Since KCC are not normally working at the weekends, that means that 2NLs will start for November interviews from Monday. Okay, we'll start to sort of hear about people being scheduled for Monday. There may have been some sent out already, actually, on Friday afternoon, but more likely that they'll be starting on Monday. Okay, so then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and so on. For the next 2 to 3 weeks, there'll be interviews being set up and 2NLs being sent out for November interviews. Okay, so maybe you'll be in that batch. Okay. I'm just reading ahead a couple. I decided to take 1 or 2 more. It's been a long session already. Okay, this is always a fun question to answer. What is the significance of the number of selectees per country? Wouldn't the DV number be the most significant factor to determine your probability of successism? There's not very much significant of the number of selectees per country, but what's significant to us is when we add up all the selectees within a region, we know how many selectees there are in that region, and when we know all the regions, we know how many selectees are chosen in that year. And let me show you again my website here. Where is that? It's on theirs. Let me show you something here. If you go to my blog, and let me just take you off the screen for a moment. Right, go to the blog and you have a look at my data. Now, you can have a look at my data. This is for Europe, and you can see that for a number of years, I've tracked all of the monthly visa bulletin numbers. But at the bottom of each year, under 25, 24, 23, you can see I've also tracked how many people are selected in the region and in the country in the globe as a whole, the whole globe. So in DV25, 131,060 people were selected, plus now we know about 100 more for the UK, or maybe 200 more for the UK. But within the region for Europe, 43,000 were selected. That's significant because the quota was about 18,000. So 18,000 people for Europe, 18,000 visas were made available for Europe, and 43,000 were selected. 51,000 visas were available globally, but 131,000 visas are selected. People are selected. So that tells you, when you think about the number of visas available and you look at each year and you say, okay, how many were selected? You can see that some years, a lot of people are selected, 140,000, 130,000. And then in some other years, low numbers were selected, 80,000, 86,000, and so on. In these years where the number is low, there's a high possibility of a second draw. That's one interesting thing. And where there are low numbers there's a high possibility that the visa bulletin goes current. Look at this one. In 2017, it went current all the way through there, right? Because there were, even though they've selected more people than there were visas, a lot of those people don't apply. They don't fill in the DS-260 ever. And then some people fill in the DS-260, but they don't show up for the interview and so on. So if they only select 80,000 people or 90,000 people even, then you pretty much can be sure that there is going to be, everybody will be current and everybody will get a chance, right? But in years where there are more than 100,000, then there's more of a risk that there would be cutoffs, right? And so when we've seen some of these later years, obviously DV21 was a mess, DV2020 was a mess. They were affected by COVID, so ignore these current numbers in those years. But you can see that in 22, again, 22 was a bit of a mess. They went current. There were less people selected overall, and so there was more chance of people getting current. As we've gone through to more normal years, 23, 24, 25, the high selectee number has led to country cutoffs, region cutoffs, right? Same thing can be said in, if we look at Africa, you can see the data there as well. So have a look at this data and you'll understand. So yeah, the number of selectees per country is not in itself significant, but the total number of selectees in a region and globally is more significant. Okay. Okay. Yes, Nicola, the visa bulletin not changing this month is not bad. It's fine. The numbers were already too high, they were crazy high, so it was fine. Okay. I got divorced. Should I submit both marriage certificate and divorce certificate, or only the divorce certificate? No, both. You're correct. You need to submit both. When you've got divorced, you need to submit both those documents, marriage and divorce. Okay. Okay, let me just see if there's any interesting questions here. Let me look for one or two more, and then we'll call it a day. Okay. Perry Kayania says, "Hi Simon, kindly advise, if I don't have a high school degree, but I have more than 5 years work experience, do I have a chance to win the DV lottery or not?" Anybody can enter the DV lottery. Whether you qualify to process the DV lottery or not is the next question. And yes, there are two ways to meet the requirements. One is through education. The other is through work experience. Now, the education level needed is roughly about the level of an 18-year-old American kid who graduates from high school, and just before they start college or university, they're at the right level for the DV lottery, right? And so all the other countries around the world are measured against that. And so typically a kid in any other country should have been educated up to about the age of 18, roughly, sometimes 17, but something in that region. And it's the point at which in that country, wherever they live, they can then enter a university, right? That's the education requirement, sort of explained in a nutshell. That's it. It's not the number of years you attended school. It's not 12 years of education. That's a misunderstanding. It's that an American kid goes through 12 years of education. It might take 11 years in your country, or 13 years in your country, or 12 years theoretically. 10 years, sorry, theoretically, you might be able to get through an education system to that level in 10 years in your country. It's just about possible. But the point is the point at which you can enter a university, right? So that's the first part, that's education. If you don't meet that requirement for education, then you can also say, yes, but I have work experience. However, that work experience can't be just any job, right? It's 2 years within the last 5 years at interview. So on the day you go to interview, you look back at your work experience for the previous 5 years, and you total up 2 years of experience at the right sort of job. And the job that we're talking about needs to be something that is managerial, supervisor, technical professional sometimes. It is jobs that require in themselves some level of training or education in order to do that job, okay? Usually you need 2 years of experience in order to do that job, and then you need to gain 2 years of experience in that job, right? So, let me put it this way. You might be a seamstress, right? That isn't a qualifying job. So it doesn't matter if you've got 10 years of experience. It doesn't matter if your job is as a seamstress, it's not a qualifying job. If, on the other hand, you own a business that employs 10 seamstresses and you happen to do that job yourself, but you're also running the business, then maybe you can qualify, right? Because you're a manager of staff that are doing that. And so it's a matter of what level you've attained. And the way you check this out, whether your job meets the requirements or not, is you go to a database called ONET Online. Let's do that. Let's show you that. This is a useful thing to do. So you Google a site, ONET Online, and it comes up ONET, well, it's ONET Online or One Tonline or whatever. ONET Online. Why is it completely blank? Okay, so let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see what I'm doing here. And this will be useful. So let's have a look at the seamstress, right? Seamstress. Close. Let's look at electrician because I can't seem to spell seamstress. Okay, so electrician. So you say you're an electrician, right? I don't know what job you do, Perry, but let's say you're an electrician. Now, what you have to look at is you look at the description of the job that we're talking about, and you come down and have a look at the job zone. And in the job zone, it gives a job zone rating 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 5, actually. I think it goes up to 5. Job zone 3 is medium preparation needed, and job zone 3 does not meet the requirements. So an electrician that has the same job description as this, the same titles as these, does the same thing as these tasks, these technology skills, an electrician qualified to that level is not qualified for DV lottery. Okay, and you look at the job zone rating, it's got to be 4 or more, and the SVP range has to be 7 or above. Okay, so if we then, but maybe your electrician supervisor. Okay, first line supervisors of construction trades and extraction workers. Okay, so that's interesting. Now you say you're an electrician still, but you're also a supervisor, and you go, oh no, job zone 3, that's not going to work. And so we go, let's say electrician manager. Let's have a look, and we look for something, construction managers, right? So now you're a manager of staff, job zone 4, right? And the SVP is above 7. So if you're, and in some jobs, the job as a supervisor might be enough to qualify you, but in other jobs, you'd need to be a manager. But the point is that there are some jobs where you won't be qualified if you say you're an electrician, but if you say, or can prove rather, that you're a manager of electricians, even though you're actually an electrician, but you're a manager, then you can qualify that way, right? So it's important to see the level at which you're qualified, right? Let's look at nurses, right? And registered nurses. Are nurses qualified to the right level? Now, it takes quite a bit of preparation to become a nurse, right? And so they have job zone 4, considerable preparation needed, and the SVP range is suitable. So a nurse can qualify, right? Let's say, let's do another one. Let's do a teacher, right? Teacher I always find is interesting. So let's just look at kindergarten teacher, right? Kindergarten teacher. Now, think about kindergarten teacher. I don't think that's a very complicated job, but according to this, that's job zone 4 and needs quite a bit of preparation. So that would qualify. That's kind of a weird one to me. I've always thought that one's a bit weird. Middle school teachers, except special education, blah, blah, blah. And that's job zone 4. I think they might have increased a couple of these. But yeah, it looks like most teachers can qualify, right? Even if you're not a manager or a principal in the education world, you can qualify as a teacher. A nurse can qualify. It depends on your profession, but that's what you need to do. You need to go and find your job in ONET Online, compare that qualification, and if you then have 2 years of experience, 2 years of experience in a job that meets the standards, then you can qualify. And that 2 years of experience has to be in the last 5 years, right? So there you go. That's how you can figure that out. Now, just one last word on work experience cases. If you turn up for your interview and you want to try and pass your interview based on work experience, you have to be prepared, right? If you're passing on education, you show your results. It's black and white. It's simple. You're showing your results. You either passed or you didn't pass the level of education needed. For work experience, you have to put a little bit of thought and effort into how you're going to show that you are the person that meets the requirements because of your education. So You need to show probably your CV or your resume showing what work you do. You need to show maybe a letter from your employer showing what job you do. You may need to show, your salary history that shows that you're being paid at a managerial level, that you got promoted 4 years ago or something and your pay level went up. Something like that. You need to provide information that makes it very clear that you're doing the job you say you're doing, right? You can't just make it up. It can't just be bullshit. You have to actually prove it, okay? So there you go. That's work experience. Okay, we'll call that a day, I think. No, we're going to take one more. I think this is hilarious. I keep getting this question. Every week I'm getting this question. I have a question about the interference between the World Cup fans and the DV lottery immigrants visa process in the countries that have already conjuncted embassies, like our case in Morocco. Okay, some people seem to think that the soccer fans coming to see the World Cup in America is going to somehow destroy the ability of consulates and embassies to do any DV cases. I don't agree that that's really a concern. Maybe, but I don't really think so personally. But anyway, we'll see. Okay, let me just turn off. There's how do I get to this? Let's see one more question here. I see somebody who's asked a super chat or whatever it is. Hello, Simon. Appreciate all the work, Majid. Appreciate all the work and support you're putting into DV selectees. Do we have any updates about the new procedure that KCC is following to reassign posts? No, we don't. We don't. So the announcement has been made saying how they're going to behave, right? And there was some weird sort of early behavior. For example, a bunch of people scheduled in Vienna that were previously assigned to Ankara had their appointments cancelled. They all complained, and eventually their appointments, as I understand it, were reinstated. But these were DV25 cases, I believe, maybe early DV26 cases. But the principle will apply. We think the principle will apply, and KCC will probably enforce the rules. But we haven't seen very much feedback yet of how they're enforcing the rules. They have challenged a couple of people to provide evidence when people say, okay, I live in that, or I've just moved to that other country. They said KCC have asked people to prove that. And so that might be the way that they handle things. They may even ask people to go in for a pre-interview at the embassy to show residence papers and that sort of thing. They may do that, but we don't know yet. It's all speculation at the moment. We have to wait and see how that plays out. Okay. So there you go. All right, we're going to call that a day. It's been a long session, almost 2 hours. Thanks for hanging out with me this morning. Give me a thumbs up, please, on this video if you liked it. I hope I got to your question. If I didn't get to your question, go to BritSimonSays.com, BritSimonSays.com, and you can ask your question there, and I will answer it for you there. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye now.